Welcome to the Explainer. If you've ever done a deep dive on polycystic ovary syndrome or PCOS, you've almost definitely seen the term inflammatory PCOS pop up. But what if I told you it's not actually a real medical diagnosis? Today, we're going to dig into the true story behind this label and what it really means for managing the condition.
So let's just get right to it with the big question. You hear people talk about inflammatory PCOS all the time, as if it's this special category, separate from other types. But is it actually a real thing, a medically recognized diagnosis? Okay, so right off the bat, the short answer is no. But wait, don't go anywhere, because the story is so much more interesting than that. Understanding why it isn't a separate diagnosis is actually the key to unlocking a way more effective way to manage your PCOS symptoms and protect your health in the long run. To really get why inflammatory PCOS is kind of a misnomer, we first have to make sure we're all on the same page about what polycystic ovary syndrome actually is. So, at its heart, PCOS is a hormonal condition. And it's incredibly common. We're talking up to 15% of women. But here's the wild part. For how widespread it is, it's so often misunderstood and even goes undiagnosed. The whole thing is kicked off by an imbalance of reproductive hormones that can really throw your whole system out of whack. And that hormonal chaos, well, it shows up in a whole bunch of different physical ways. Not everyone gets all of them, of course, but you know the classic signs. Periods that are all over the place, stubborn acne, excess hair growth, and that constant struggle with weight gain. Okay, so where does inflammation fit into this whole picture? This right here is the crucial link. It's the reason the term inflammatory PCOS even exists, and honestly, it's where the science gets really fascinating. First things first, you gotta know that not all inflammation is the bad guy. There's acute inflammation. That's your body's helpful short-term reaction when you, say, twist your ankle. It swells up, gets to work healing, and then it's done. But chronic inflammation, well, that's a whole different beast. It's like your body's alarm system is stuck in the on position, and that can be really damaging over time. And I love this analogy because it just hits the nail on the head. Chronic inflammation isn't some big, dramatic tidal wave that you can't miss. Nope, it's a constant, slow, and steady drip, silently causing problems in the background, sometimes for years. And here is the absolute kicker. Study after study shows that women with PCOS consistently have higher levels of this chronic low-grade inflammation. So do you see? Inflammation isn't a type of PCOS. It's a fundamental core feature that's literally baked into the condition itself. And look, this isn't just some minor detail. That constant slow drip we were talking about, it's a huge deal. It's a major risk factor that seriously increases the chances of developing other long-term and pretty serious health problems down the road. When you dig into the research, that persistent inflammation is tied to 3 major long-term risks. It can make getting pregnant more difficult, it dramatically increases the chance of developing type 2 diabetes, and it can lead to heart disease later in life. Let's just let that diabetes risk sink in for a second. According to the CDC, more than half of all women with PCOS will develop type 2 diabetes by the time they are 40 years old. More than half. That's a coin flip. It's staggering. And if that wasn't enough, get this. One major study found that women with PCOS are a whopping 4 times more likely to develop type 2 diabetes compared to women without the condition. 4 times. And the risk doesn't just stop with diabetes. This same inflammation can directly mess with ovulation and your fertility. On top of that, it's a key reason women with PCOS have higher rates of high blood pressure and stroke, putting their long-term heart health on the line. Okay, so that sounds like a lot of bad news, right? But here's where the story takes a turn. This is the empowering part. Because if inflammation is a key driver, that means you have a target. You can actually do something about it. So let's open up the toolkit. Your 2 biggest weapons in this fight, it really comes down to what you eat and how you move. Making smart changes here can directly lower that inflammation, which then helps get PCOS symptoms under control and slashes those long-term risks. When it comes to food, a good place to start is just being mindful of the things that tend to fuel inflammation. You know, the usual suspects. Things like white bread and pastries, sugary drinks, and a lot of processed foods. But honestly, focusing on what you have to cut out can be a total drag, right? A much better and frankly more successful way to think about it is, what can you add to your plate? Think about flooding your body with colorful, whole foods, packed with all those amazing nutrients and antioxidants that actually fight inflammation. All right, let's talk about exercise. The research here is actually super clear. It points to a kind of magic number for women with PCOS, a minimum of 120 minutes of vigorous intensity exercise per week. That's where they see the biggest drop in inflammation and the best improvements in insulin resistance.
And vigorous might sound intense, but it doesn't mean you have to become a marathon runner overnight. It's really just anything that gets your heart pumping. It could be running, swimming, a fun HIIT class, or hopping on a spin bike. The real secret sauce is just being consistent.
So, we've busted a pretty common myth, we've looked at the science, and we've built a practical toolkit. So after all that, what's the one big idea you should really walk away with? It all comes down to this one shift in perspective. Stop thinking of inflammatory PCOS as a thing you have. It's not some special subtype. Instead, understand that chronic, low-grade inflammation is just a core, fundamental part of the condition. And the absolute best part? It's manageable. And once you really get that, everything changes. It's so empowering because you're no longer fighting some confusing label. You're targeting something real, the inflammation itself. And that gives you the power to make changes that will have a massive impact on your health. So, we'll leave you with this. Real change never happens in one giant leap. It's all about those small first steps. So the question is, what is one small change you can make, starting today, to begin turning down that inflammation?